So one of the biggest misconceptions with crypto, especially in the press, is that it's anonymous and that transactions are anonymous. They're not anonymous, they're pseudo anonymous, right? The majority of transactions initiated in the crypto space come from regulated exchanges or wallet services, right? Which are KYC dependent and have, somewhat robust KYC programs. So they're pseudo anonymous because ultimately that source, that exchange, that wallet service could seemingly identify who owned such and such wallet and see transactions going in or out, right? So it's pseudo anonymous in so much that one can't necessarily immediately identify the owner of a particular wallet, but with a subpoena, for instance, they could, right? So that's where mixers come in. And, mixers offer that anonymity that hardcore crypto acolytes demand or believe should be at the center of crypto. And so the question is, what are the legalities surrounding Bitcoin and crypto mixers? And you saw over the summer, bestmixer.io got shut down in Europe by Danish authorities for money laundering, and it's a real concern if you're going to start a mixing service. First of all, you are an exchange, right? You're a crypto exchange, even though you're aggregating transactions for purposes of sending them to the person who initiated the transaction, right? You're still acting as a money transmitter at a U.S. federal level. So it would require, at a minimum, a money service business registration, right? That's number one. In so much that fiat isn't typically involved, fiat currency, you probably wouldn't have any state law, money transmitter licensure implications, but you're definitely a crypto type exchange that would require registration as a money service business. So that's number one. Number two, if you're not going to be a money service business and you're going to run a mixer service that doesn't do KYC, you've got a problem, because being the money service business requires you to do AML KYC. And so if you're going to run a unregistered mixer service or do it like offshore, one, you could run afoul of FinCEN in the United States if you're going to cater to U.S. residents. But you could also be aiding and abetting money laundering if the wrong people use your service, right? Because you don't know. You ultimately would not know if you're not going to do KYC. And a lot of people who have approached me, contacts want to start mixing services, things like that, it's a tough sell, because even if you go offshore with your service, it's who you cater to, right? Remember, it's not, going offshore isn't this panacea that allows you to do everything. It's a panacea from the perspective of you may not want to come back to the United States forever, or you may not want to pay taxes on money that you keep offshore, but at low tax rates, assuming you're in a tax haven. But it doesn't preclude you or prevent you from having to comply with the laws of the nations that you operate in, right? It's outward looking, not inward looking, okay? And there's some exceptions to that, part of the British common law, things like that nature, which you can get into, but just having a U.S.-centric sort of discussion about it, it's not necessarily going to preclude you from any sort of legal liability. So you have to really consider whether being an MSB defeats the purpose of having the mixer, or if you're going to have a mixer that's not registered as an MSB, is it worth the risk of catering to U.S. residents, knowing that you're in violation, arguably, of the law, right? So that's obviously, your concern there. But there's a point and there's a purpose to it. And again, I think the hardcore crypto, purists want to see that anonymity, but that anonymity comes at a high cost if you're not willing to comply with the laws and regulations of wherever you're at. Now, one alternative, which would be my third point, is to obtain a license in like a Seychelles or Malta or something like that to run a mixer legally, which carries with it certain AML KYC requirements, but you have nations that are more protective of how that KYC and AML is shared, right? So that may be an alternative to pursue, and I'll talk about that in a future video about Malta and Gibraltar and some of these more obscure places and how they share information and how their licenses can be valuable. Same could be said for like a Bermuda, but it's decidedly a very risky endeavor because just from the perspective of being in the U.S., you are a money service business. Like registration would absolutely be required. If they're requiring money service business registration for ICOs, and that's just the mere exchange of basically selling something, right? A token for currency or a token for other crypto. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have your full-blown cryptocurrency exchanges. Well, that middle ground is that mixer, which even though it's arguably just the user recycling and then combining the inputs of other users' transactions to send out the thing, it's not going to escape money service business registration requirements. So it's an interesting concept, and I get where people want to come with these, and I understand why people want to see this total anonymity across the crypto landscape. But I think you're going to find, especially after like the best mixer incident, how that site was seized, that comes at a very steep price if you're not willing to operate completely offshore, domicile yourself completely offshore, and assume that you're never going to step foot in certain nations again, right? Because that's the cost. So interesting questions all around, but valuable service to a lot of people. So you have to weigh the pros and cons, I suppose. But if you have any questions, definitely hit me up, Adam at adamtracy.io, and I will talk to you soon.